Listen Lanarkshire is a community radio station governed by the registered charity Getting Better Together Limited. Therefore, the radio station itself retains political neutrality, and any political views or comments aired as part of political discussion programming or otherwise are not the views of Listen Lanarkshire, nor of Getting Better Together Limited. The station has a set of key commitments found on the Ofcom website, and we adhere to all necessary Ofcom rules. For more information or inquiries, please contact us at radio@shotshealthyliving.com.
Good evening, North Lanarkshire, and welcome to another episode of What's the Point, the only show where the microphones stay on longer than what you can get in the council webcast, and the only opposition that hasn't had an enhanced payment yet for this Labour administration. I'm your host, Greg Lennon, still unpaid by Labour, emotionally, financially and spiritually, Jerry Brennan. Tonight we're diving head first into the Brown Bin Blues, or the Brown Bin Gate, as we also know it, Robbie. Yes, that committee meeting also, and asking, is this a light touch dictatorship disguised as governance, or just old-fashioned gaslighting with a standing order attached? We'll also be talking about the rise of reform and what that means for North Lanarkshire. Who will be the first Tory to jump ship, and will they ever wait for a lifeboat? And finally, we'll be asking, what is the point of being an independent councillor these days? How much say do they really have, and how much is just theatre, or is it without a mic, Robbie? I'm joined as always by my old partner in procedural crime, Jerry Brennan, or as he's known across Bells Hill, the Bellsy Hill Bowler, the only man who can break standing orders with a grin and still get offered a lift home by half the Labour group. Jerry, how are you?
I'm very well, Greg, and as always it's an extraordinary pleasure to be in your company.
Well, we've got a packed show tonight, Jerry, so I hope you're brushed up in your council stats, or it's no motions for you for a while. I already hear the provost stamp.
There's time.
Sharpening his incompetence stamp for you. And joining us in the virtual hot seat tonight, Jerry, is our good friend Councillor Robert McKendrick, a man who hasn't been bought, bribed or gagged just yet, and who's here to remind us that real opposition still exists, even if it never gets invited to pre-meeting briefings. Robbie, how are you?
I'm very well. I'm very glad to be here for a lovely wee chat.
We're glad to have you, Robbie. We're glad to have you.
Tuesday night, Sunny Shots.
Absolutely.
So, time for you to grab a cuppa, lock up your compost, and let's ask the question everybody's shouting about at their phones for months on. What is the point? Robert, thank you very much for joining us this evening. We are delighted to have you on. So to kind of kick things off, Robert, why don't you tell the good folks at home why you stood for council election? What would be the main reason for that?
Oh, I've been in and around council elections probably since about 1996. My Uncle David was a councillor for 1980, but I've probably went through about 5 elections with my dad and 2 myself, so I've been about politics for a wee while, you know, probably on the skirmishes, but I've been there, like, you know, and I know a wee bit about what's been going on for the last 20 or 30 years in the Motherwell district.
Yeah.
I've always felt that independent was the best way to go for me. The 2 people in my family that went before me, they followed the independent route, and I think it works ideal.
So you've never been associated with any political party?
No, I've never actually been really interested in any political party.
We've had some discussions around this on earlier episodes of the show, and spoke about how the party structure is an impediment, actually, or can be an impediment to good local governments. It gets in the way of decision making, and I think it creates a barrier between the local government itself and the people that you're there to serve. It's a middleman that I don't really believe has a role to play in it.
I think at this level of politics, if you are trying to look after your constituents' interests, and you're in that party system, it can be very, very difficult.
Yeah.
I could take the point of maybe if say they were the ruling party were going to close a school, for example, and I had to vote against that. It's just not possible for me to go down that route.
No.
Other things that come up, maybe like the school transport, it's not possible for me. For me to. I'm not here to make my constituents poorer.
Of course,
You know?
of course. Listen, and I think obviously when we invited you onto this, Robbie, one of the interesting facts that I found out about the sort of McKendrick line in Murdeston especially is you have had somebody elected up in that area for almost 40 years. Is it over 40 years? 45 years.
It's incredible.
5 years.
There's an incredible amount of trust placed on your family in relation to local politics.
But again, it's based on the people before politics.
Yeah.
It's about helping the people in your community.
Yeah.
I mean, independents very, very seldom what I say in the big decisions that are made. And they very seldom become conveners or anything like that. But there is a ground-based attitude that we look after the people that's in our community first. A party wouldn't suit me. I wouldn't be able to do what I do without, being independent.
Robbie, I've only known you since we were elected in 2020, May 2022. But and I'm not saying that this isn't true for other elected members, but there is an integrity around independent politicians because they're not beholden to anything. They can vote. They vote with their conscience mostly. Yes. Vote with their communities. Never whipped.
I wish more people could vote with their conscience. That would be for me. That's the way forward.
I think it's the only way. It's the only way forward.
I was actually surprised when you guys went down that route.
We've had the party structure, to be honest, and it didn't suit us at the best of times. Let's be honest about that. We were continuously raising concern in relation to some certain aspects and directions that the local SNP group in North Lanarkshire was being taken, and from our perspective, does that really serve the people who elected us? That's the question.
No.
And really, in effect, in my own sort of experience in this, that's 2 terms that I was elected, and within those 2 terms it was a significant vote in my ward area, and that's a lot of people placing trust in you to make sure that you're raising the viewpoints and issues that are important to local people. How do you do that under a party management structure? I really don't see how, if you've got, say, for talking, say, 30, 40 councillors sitting there competing or vying in relation to what ward area gets that representation. But it's quite easy to divide within that circumstance.
I've watched, as you, Robbie, and Greg will have watched over the years, where a contentious decision has to be made in a particular locality. We'll just take Shotts, for example. If a service was to close within the community, and that decision was taken at a committee where a local elected member was on that committee, they might be taken off that. They might be substituted on that day so that they're not tarnished by that.
About the toilet.
Or they might go to the toilet.
They'll go to the toilet a few times.
So all of that goes on within the party structure, rather than just standing up, being your own man or woman, and just saying, listen, that not in my name, or yes in my name.
There is a glaring omission for you, Jerry, and that's the new tactic that seems to be deployed, that everybody in the chamber now turns their microphones off and shouts out the direction in which they're voting so that it's not recorded.
It's not picked up.
This is true. This is true.
No, I would never ever put myself in the situation where, as you said, you would maybe take you off that committee for the day. I would be off that committee if they were putting something down in my community. I would be in there for 2 minutes, and if you were coming against my community, I wouldn't last. So putting me in a party under these circumstances wouldn't suit me. So
how does it work then, Robbie, for you? You're an independent councillor, legitimately elected by the people, your ward area, to stand in there as a sole independent. We often, and I think this has been raised over the years as well, especially in the last couple of years with the independents when it comes to budget setting process. You'll be aware we had Cllr Williams on last week with a significant discussion about how difficult that budget setting process was for Cllr, and really in effect, does she get the same level of briefings that other political groupings would get? as an independent, there seems to be a sort of, well, it's been ratified a couple of times. There's been a couple of times where a certain independent councillor has a leadership role within the independents, but you have been truly elected as independents.
Independents, yeah.
So how can you have a leader of the independents?
There isn't such a thing in our group. You know, there isn't a leader. There's 4 sitting in there at the moment, and we all go our own way.
Right.
We do not. Nobody asks me who I'm voting for or whatever like that. I make my decision on the day.
Yeah.
Rightly or wrongly, I'll vote for what I think's right for the constituents. I'll not take any noise for anybody else. I'll not take any coercion for anybody else. I'll just go with what.
I remember at one or
what
two
the common
meetings.
sense is.
Yeah, I remember at 1 or 2 meetings where Councillor Alan Beveridge was referred to as the leader of the independents, and I always found that really strange how that title was given to him.
Alan would actually tell you that himself, that we've never ever had a.
Well, definitely right.
We don't have any meetings. But going back to the budget setting process, yes, I do agree that the budget setting process could be a lot better than it is.
Yeah.
I mean, we basically get handed at the day of the meeting, 20 minutes before we go in, we get handed A4 sheets.
A £1.1 billion
Yes.
annual revenue.
We get it on an
budget.
A4 sheet, and we are supposed to make
insane.
a decision in the next hour on what to vote for.
Do you think that's by design? Do you think it's a case that so you're voting with administration? Because ultimately it's administration
It could
that
well
decides
be
the process.
It could well be to do it by design so that figures are not leaked and stuff like that. But does it really give the constituents and their elected members the true sort of? I mean, even when we debate, you know.
What's your experience? What's your experience of that? Because we're going to come on to what your actual experience in North Lanarkshire Council is, Robbie. What's your experience of the debating chamber? How do you find it?
I find it very, very. I think the two main parties, there's a lot of, I don't like using this word, but a lot of hatred there. They actually, it's very, very. It feels a toxic place at times. You know, I feel that. That's my God's honest. I think it's a terrible place to work in. And my dad said that before he passed. He says in the last 7 years or so before, when it became the coalition, it became very, very toxic, and you had independent stuff and all that, and people were entrenched in their views. So I don't see any sort of. I don't see any working together. I don't see that. You know, I think there is quality people in there. There's quality people. Jerry's good, yourself's good, Paul, and there's others there.
Don't give him platitudes.
But there is others there.
Carry on.
There's others there that can marshal facts. They can marshal facts and present an argument and put their point across really well, and it just gets blown away in the wind because everything is set up for a vote before you go in there, and there's no real debate and there's no real ideas being presented at the actual.
Revert
back to slagging SNP or slagging Labour or slagging Conservatives, and at that point I'm sitting there and I'm saying to myself, I'd be as well just going up and helping wee Mary get a roof fixed and just closing my book.
Well, we have tasted it a few times, like bringing forward Labour proposals just to see what the response was going to be, and each time I've brought it through, it's fallen. Labour have voted against their own proposals, and you're right. It's like if it doesn't emanate from the Labour group, then it's of no value at all.
It comes back to this idea, and what you're saying, the idea of tribal politics that exists. An easy out for everybody is to go right back to the constitutional debate. Well, you support in an independent, because this is what we see in the council chamber a lot. As if councillors have any say in a national setting in regards to Scotland's going to be independent or no. But yet our councillors deem that as an appropriate line of attack and argument to continue a debate. And it's a falsehood in my opinion.
You could see sometimes they will talk for 40 minutes about what Westminster's doing or what Holyrood's doing. And it's really... It's pathetic. It's not what we're there for, and that's the thing that needs to change in the chamber. We need to get the ideas out in the chamber in the debate. whatever people are bringing, whatever people are saying.
You might not believe this about me, right? But given my years on this planet, I became a wee bit cynical, Robbie, and I see these kind of tactics by design again.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, if you're bringing it to a constitutional question, then you're not bringing it to actually what matters to the people in North Lanarkshire. Nope. The issue becomes that you're stayed within party warfare, and that's how the majority of committees, in my opinion, in my experience.
Warfare's a good word for it.
Well, it's exactly
That's
that.
exactly
That. But the interesting point for me here is as an independent, if it's a case, let's take for talking's sake the brown bins, right? Now, I know you've been a very strong opponent to the idea of charging people in relation to brown bin charges. How would you go about actually as an independent? By the way, I want to raise this matter. Would you take it to committee? Would you take it full council? What would be your normal mindset in that, Robert?
I would go through the elected officers.
You'd go through the officers?
I would go through the officers rather than debate it in the chamber, because debating in the chamber for me is going to lead to nowhere. Yeah. I would rather present the facts to the officers that are putting these decisions forward for us to vote on. Yeah.
So again, with the officers then, do you find that your experience with that would lead to a better outcome? Because let's say that's a policy decision for the council in relation to a brown bin charge.
Yes.
To overturn a policy, we need to take it to committee, or we need to take it to full council. It needs to be ratified somewhere.
Yes.
If an officer was the one that was coming out and saying, Robert, look, listen, we're working on this, we're going to try and do X, Y and Z, how does that constitute a tangible
Sometimes
result?
you can get results.
Right.
Sometimes you can get results and you can get things changed before they get to the level of the vote. But the brown bins is just another.
We've got to come on to that, Robbie. Keep a hold of that. Keep a hold of that.
The school transport for me was probably one of the worst decisions that we made. I think there's a number of bad decisions. Cllr in there, cutting a ASN, cutting a classroom assistants, NLC 9 workers. God, the list is becoming endless.
But I think Robert,
affecting everybody in North Lanarkshire, all the children in North Lanarkshire. That was a really big one for me, and I really I couldn't get my head around about that at all.
But we still have, I mean, after 2027, the issue of active and creative communities comes back to the table. So community centres, libraries, swimming pools that continue to exist at the moment that were saved from the chop are back on the agenda. So the Shotts pool here, Shotts Leisure Centre, the John Smith pool in Airdrie, Matt Busby. People forget that these facilities offer not just a place for recreation for young people. It's about wellness, holistic health, rehab, and that helps in preventative spend. There's a lot of savings to be had from maintaining these services, keeping them up to date, investing in them year after year. And instead we're going through, and I asked this question at one of the budget meetings about, do we have an active strategy of managed decline within North Lanarkshire, and the answer was yes. And I think that's quite disgraceful.
The most important thing is when you lose these facilities,
they're gone forever.
That's forever. They don't come back.
No. Yeah, and will the hub model replace that? Do we think that community hubs are going to be the places where you now have your new swimming pool within a community hub model? Or you have these different things that are required? Because again, the assets that are currently in existence, surely invest in them and bring them up to a standard. Then that additional
swimming pools would be the cost for the swimming pools is the one that's the major thing. It's the maintenance with the swimming pools. Maybe get hubs, schools, pitches, but in the long run, to finance pools will be a big.
An interesting point for you both is we're very good friend Louise Murphy, who does the show before this show, had highlighted on our social media channels this week that card payments only are being accepted in the Shotts area within the leisure centre now. So are we going to see that rolled out across the authority now as well? Are we going to see people really in effect being disenfranchised in relation to if it's a case that you've only got cash on you to use these facilities?
Very disappointing.
It's I was listening to I can't remember which committee. It might have been the climate change committee, and we were speaking already, despite the massive additional money that came through the council this year. We're talking about over the next 2 years further savings to be made of around £55 million. £55 million over 2 years. Now, each year we go through the same papers that are produced by the officers identifying the various areas where we can make savings, there's virtually nothing left.
Listen, I'm not in disagreement with you, but I want to come back to a couple of points on your experience, Robbie, right? Because ultimately, as I said, and I hope you don't take this wrong, but it's a family dynasty, the name McKendrick. And I'm not meaning that in any sort of disrespectful way, but it's true. Your family has been representative of the Murdeston Ward, rightly, in my opinion, for standing up for local people and championing the local community for all that time. You find yourself as an independent, like you say, you're an independent within 3 other independents, and you've got Councillor Williams in there, who's the solitary Green councillor, who's treated like an independent, even though she's part of a mainstream political party. We are a group of 7, and we find it difficult to tend to agree on every matter. We believe that every single member within our group has the right to vote whatever direction they wish to vote. But in matters of contention, we always know we'll lobby Cllr, and especially when it comes to local ward matters. With your experience, how do you find that within the other independents? I'm not asking for any sort of trick question or anything to try and sort of slate anybody or anything. I'm just looking for experience. How difficult it is to garner the support of the other independents? Because my own viewpoint of that is, especially when you look at the independents there, I think one of them gets a convenership. The other one is on the NHS Health Board, so these are paid positions. And then we go to the SNP group leader, who's in a paid position, and Labour councillors obviously take convenerships. And then there's that unofficial coalition that exists with the Tory party, where I think 2 of them are in formal paid positions.
They're part of the administration. There's no question.
We have no formal discussions on any matter.
On any matter?
As in for voting.
Right.
We don't discuss together. Maybe some of the other ones do. Yeah. But I work on my own.
Aye.
You know, I don't take what they say. Yeah. They don't. We don't have meetings before we go in for a vote. We are strictly independent. We vote whatever way we decide that day.
You would think in relation to a major issue like school transport or something like that, there would be maybe even a briefing paper or somebody, listen, I'm not happy, this is the way I think we should all go. No,
we don't.
Nothing.
Do
I think the having that independent approach that you spoke about there, Robbie, and that's obviously important to your whole councillorship, right? Having that independence of mind and thought and decision making and all the rest of it. It does worry me that individuals who stand for, you know, as an independent councillor, and it's their own decision to make, but when they take positions within the administration, paid positions, I feel like it does look as if there is even if there's not, it can look as if there's the potential for you to I don't want to say bought, that's probably unfair, but if a contentious decision is going to go through and you're receiving a payment,
I disagree. But signal,
it's never sat well with me.
What signal does that send to your own group, that you don't have the talent or the skill set to be able to fulfil the positions, other than if it's a case that you're buying individuals, in my opinion, that if it's a case that you're putting them into a paid position, then obviously down the line at some point support's going to be required for that. You're not just going to give individuals that convenerships or enhanced payments for no reason. And that's the real question, is there democracy? And
that's why I won't take any of the positions.
Quite right, Robin, nor will we. So the position in this becomes then a fundamental question, and whether or not these paid positions ultimately carry with it later down the road that support will be required on certain subject matters. You can shout, you can be tribal, you can talk about all these different things in the chamber,
but you'll toe the party line.
But when I come for that support from our old friend, I'll not play the music yet, I'm coming on to play, I've not set it up yet, so there'll be an El Presidente moment coming.
It's fabulous. Do you know what I was going to ask, just around the legacy, if you like, of the McKendricks in North Lanarkshire Council? Is there a future lineage after yourself? Do you have interested children that
at the moment
take the baton? At
the moment, I would say no.
Right.
There's nobody really that's looking to keep it going, you know.
Right.
maybe something I need to think about.
An interesting point for me. I've had conversations with my kids about whatever career path that they're interested in going down, and I do always fit it in there. Would you not be interested in politics? And the blank expressions on their face, absolutely not. And I think that's a sad indictment, because they're just not engaging anymore. But there does seem to be a sort of wave out there of young people who, which is a nice segue into where we were originally going anyway, is into where the future of politics lies, especially within North Lanarkshire. And again, obviously with the council elections being last week and reform sort of wiping the slate clean down in England, what is your thoughts in relation to as we fast approach not only the Scottish Government elections next year, but in 2027 the local government elections? What do you think the political landscape in North Lanarkshire will be by then? Because I think it's going to be really, really interesting. I don't know if we'll have any Conservatives left in North Lanarkshire, and whether or not they've all jumped ship and went straight onto the reform bandwagon and trying to stand as reform candidates. And a more fundamental question, an interesting question for you, as Labour has clearly entered into an unofficial coalition with regards to the Conservative Party in North Lanarkshire, does that mean we'll potentially see a Labour reform coalition in North Lanarkshire?
Why wouldn't you?
Why wouldn't we?
Just going back to that point that you made, the question I put to Robbie about the legacy and about young people being involved. I mean, you've got children, you have children, and as do I, and they're up, sort of thing. They're in their late teens and 20s. From my perspective, a wee bit older from yours, and same with your own kids, Greg. But they must hear what goes on in the house. Do you know what I mean? Even if they say to your face, I hate that my dad's a councillor. Yeah. That's they live and breathe it. He's doing my nutting. Yeah. In actual fact, there's seeds being planted all the time. And as my kids get up now, they're beginning to ask me questions that before they would have just said they were never interested in it. But
the questions I get asked, especially after they've watched the committee, is how's that legal? But I'll not get into that.
I thought it was that. Where did you go when you get kicked out?
Aye, goodness me.
I think I would caveat it that way. If you look at, for example, the Scottish Parliament elections that are coming in a year's time, look at the number of people that are getting out, that don't want to be there anymore. Yeah. And I see that as probably the fact that these people had good intentions when they went into politics, and they now see that they can't affect any change, or they can. It's the change is just not there now. Yeah. They're stuck in a rut, and it's across the board. It's at Westminster. It's everywhere now. These people are saying, I come into this to make things better. Yeah. And it's getting harder and harder and harder to make things better in the community and in the country.
And again, this isn't pops at Labour or anything like that. It just so happens that they were the party that won the general election, and the mantra that they gave was change, and quite a lot of the country bought that at the time, in my opinion. Then fast forward,
no change left.
That's what I was going to say. So push forward.
I don't think I've seen or heard as many dissenting voices against
Labour now.
A new government. Yeah. Usually they get a good year, 2 years, a honeymoon period. The pensioners thing and
everything. PIP claimants and everything.
Fuel allowance, the disability. It really
interesting point for the council elections down south, which I found fascinating, is you've just had a right battering at the local council elections, and it doesn't matter what way we frame it. There's no better description.
Did you see the Staffordshire result? The Staffordshire result was something like 46 Tory candidates
Labour
and 46 Reform.
Well, Labour's position in that is we need to move quicker or faster and harder, we need to start doing things fast. And you're looking and you're going, surely that's the electorate telling you that your time in government, the 9 months that it's been so far, have been calamitous. And here's the question then to come back up to here is, how are Labour going to do you think? How do you think they're going to fare in the Scottish Parliament elections, Jerry?
So I was looking at the figures on Ballot Box Scotland today. Other providers are available, of course, but theirs is pretty good. So the projections for, and these came out on the 22nd of April, so they're pretty up to date. SNP are expected to have a total of 59. Labour 20. Tories
20 in total.
20 in total.
Is that constituency seats or
So
list seats?
I'll break them down from
Yeah.
the beginning, right?
Yeah.
SNP 58 constituency seats, and they're only expected to get one list seat, given that they'll have such a high number. The Labour group are only expected to get 3 constituencies across the whole country, and the vast majority of their seats would be made up by list, so 17 list. The Tories, they would win 6 constituency seats and have 11 on the list. The Lib Dems 5 constituency, 4 on the list. The Greens only 1 constituency, 9 on the list. But then the whacker comes at the end, because Alba have dropped off completely. The last time we had any meaningful discussion about this before we came to Sunny Shots was that they were looking to have between 8 and 10. They've dropped off entirely, so they have none. And Reform are expected at this point to pick up 14
So
regional
I think
list
that's
seats.
a reasonable question to ask at this point. Then, did the people in North Lanarkshire elect a Labour-Tory coalition in North Lanarkshire? Which the answer is clearly no. But the position would be, is that going to translate to Labour come the council elections? Because if they're diminishing in the polls in relation to the Scottish Parliament elections, and then we get to 2027, their numbers are going to be vastly reduced in the local authority. Now, if you give the fact that this is Labour heartland, North Lanarkshire is the place Labour have built every single foundation, do you think people have had enough of Labour, especially when you start to look at the way the council's been ran and what's been delivered? I asked that question the last time we were on here. Do you feel richer? Do you feel there is more in your pocket to spend?
I think the Labour, I would go along with the stats. They probably would tally in with what I would think myself, right, if I was looking at what would happen in the Scottish Parliament elections. But I think the local Labour Party will take the hit for the Westminster Party. I think they've upset so many people at so many levels.
In 27?
I think the Scottish Parliament, there'll be a knock-on effect for that, and I think at the council elections, the Labour Party will take the hit for what the hierarchy in London are doing.
Do you think locally, do you think Labour's out of touch? Do you think they're out of touch now? Do you think it's a case that anything being brought forward by constituents and the people in North Lanarkshire, do you think it's just a case that because they've had that much power for time immemorial since the entire history of the council, that they don't need to do anything or listen anymore?
I think inevitably that's what happens when you've been in power for so long. There's you feel you belong. You've always been in power. So there's that kind of feeling that you know best. Doesn't really matter what decisions are made, whether it knocks people's noses out of joint, whether kids are having to walk 3 miles each way to school, whether the swimming pool's getting shut, whether your bins are getting charged for we're moving people from the graveyards because we can just put them as part of a bigger team and move them about and all the rest of it. We can do what we like because it's our fiefdom. We own it, and you are our subjects.
Because you're looking at it from perspective as well. They need one last bastion, I would expect, somewhere to call their stronghold. And if you look at how Anas Sarwar's currently dealing with things in the Scottish sort of side of things, he's already got revolt coming. I think Richard Leonard, Monica Lennon, others are all putting in concerns about how the UK government is performing, and ultimately Scottish Labour's just a branch office of the Westminster establishment. So how are they effectively going to try and deviate or move away from national policy? I think it's going to be really, really difficult for them to try and sell the public another mantra of change. Or is it a case that we need big bad reform there as the boogeyman, so that they can line their shots up and try and have a scare story in the making to try and...
I don't think reform will make the impact in Scotland that it's making down in England. I dare say I'll take a number of seats, but I would bet against them getting into the 10s, 12s, 14s. I think Scotland's a different country. It's a different... There's a different mindset in this country, I would hope I would hope that.
Yeah, as I was going to say, you hope.
We've looked at just before we came on, we were looking at where these candidates have came from.
Yeah.
These newly elected members of Reform that are now either councillors or mayors or whatever, regional mayors. Vast majority of them have come from the Conservative Party sort of thing. The Tories have always been with us. They're like the poor in the Bible. You know what I mean? They've been there. They've been there forever. And every now and again, there will be an upstart party of adjutants that will come up. But if you're largely made up by members or disaffected members of the Tory group, I honestly think that after a wee while, even the name Reform suggests you're there for a specific issue.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you make that Reform and then you duck back out, whereas the Conservatives are the part, you know, England's party of government. I don't see in 10 years' time us having a discussion about Reform, despite the and we'll go on to talk about this later on.
One-hit wonder,
Greg. Listen, it's been seismic what happened, and if you replicate that across the whole country, it'd be quite frightening.
I'm not sitting here as a cheerleader in relation to Reform. What I do think is it's going to be a position that people feel they put their faith and their trust in Labour in relation to change mantra. They're desperate for change, and whether or not it's just in North Lanarkshire or wider afar. The issue here is people looking for something different. The two political party state no longer exists, in my opinion.
Scotland had the SNP.
Well, that's what I was going to say. We
England never really had the third party. They had the Lib Dems, but they never really made any ground since the early 1900s when the Lib Dem was a big party.
I'm not going to, we're never on here to name names or anything like that, but I live in Bellsill, right? And Bellsill, growing up, as red Labour as you can possibly get. Homie, Jimmy Hamilton and other elected members. But when I speak to friends of mine who would be Labour voters privately, they are disgusted actually at some of the decisions that have been made on their behalf, and they don't want to vote Tories because they remember when the Craig shot and Stuart Lloyd shot and all the rest of it, and they might not be minded towards independence. They find themselves with no home to go to, and what are they left with?
Well, that's
Nigel Farage.
That's the question. Then coming back to your point at the start, Robbie, is that a case people need more independence, and then that stops that so-called wave that people think is going to take place, especially in Scotland.
I would like to see 10-12 independents in North Lanarkshire, and then at that point you could maybe coalesce with each other and work together.
Well, we've got a power imbalance at that point, then that
how many do we need?
Discourse and democracy taking place, Robbie. Don't you be foolish.
How many do we need to get the requisition order, Greg?
You need, goodness,
is it 19?
19, I think, or 20. Was it 20?
So that's the magic number.
That's the magic number.
Get to the magic number and we can get requisitions through.
So on that point, we'll be back after a few songs, and then we'll be straight right into the whole brown bin gate, Robbie, a subject matter I'm sure you'll be happy to talk about, and especially considering the fact we're talking about lack of democratic process and lack of discourse. Well, we're going to hear some highlights for last week's Environmental and Climate Change Committee. We'll be right back after these songs. Hello and welcome back to What's the Point, talking about predicting riots. We're coming on to a lovely contentious subject matter, Jerry. Our old pal Paul Damasio at the Environment and Climate Change Committee last week, where he was basically ejected, Robbie, for highlighting that there was a petition out there with over 1,700 signatures about the brown bin charges, and he wanted to raise it just as a members' debate. Jerry, where do we unpack this?
If it hadn't been real life, it would have been comical watching it. It was just a debacle. So I think from Paul's perspective, he wanted to rightly give credence to the fact that 1,700 people had taken. Was it 1,700 or it's over?
1,700.
It's increased now. Actually, since Paul's input.
Since this, it was over 600 people who signed the petition.
So it's about 2,300 souls that have taken the time to. And by the way, it takes about 10 minutes to complete the whole thing. So
of course,
people have taken a reasonable amount of time to voice their unhappiness at it. And Paul wanted to pay his respects to that, and as such he wanted to take to the floor of the chamber the potential to suspend standing orders,
which
rules.
is a very, very simple process, Robbie. Very
Absolutely.
simple process.
Just a year
we're allowed to suspend standing orders at any point.
So as soon as someone says I want to suspend standing orders, sometimes they'll give the reason for that, but we knew
we shouldn't be given any reason for that. Shouldn't go straight to a vote, allow members to decide, and then you can present your motion or whatever it may be.
It should have gone to the vote immediately.
Well, last week, Jerry, when we were discussing El Presidente, we had a wee soundbite, and I thought it would be highly appropriate this week to have a wee soundbite to recognise our good friend Councillor Helen Loughran and her amazing committee convenership skills and credibility. I'm going to try this again. I don't know if it'll work, but here we go.
Authority here, Jackie Weaver. No authority at all.
So no authority, Jackie Wheeler, and I think that's an absolutely apt soundbite. I will get better at this, Robbie. I'll get seamless at some point.
That did spring to mind, I have to say.
Exactly.
As soon as it begun. Jackie Wheeler.
So what I'm going to do is, because I've had the opportunity to allow the good people at home listening to this radio station tonight, because they don't have a clue about what's happening. We uploaded a video with a wee commentary on it earlier in the week, just practically after it happened at the committee, where Paul was ejected, and the shambles that unfolded in relation to trying to get Paul voted out the chamber and then voted back in to allow him to take place in it. It just absolutely ended up in chaos.
They not actually put him out the chamber, then asked him to vote.
That put him out the chamber, then somebody had to go and get him back in the chamber to then get him to vote in his original. I'm coming on, I'm going to break it all down for the good people at home, but before that, I can tell you that our social media channels is What's the Point North Lanarkshire on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. The video is available on these sites, and I would really appreciate if you go and take a wee look for it yourself, and then take part in the conversation, because ultimately this is the question: is this how public discourse should be getting conducted in North Lanarkshire? I'm going to jump straight in. I know you're jumping at a bit here, Jerry, to come in. On you go.
I really just want to say that it's becoming increasingly clear that what the last thing that we want to have in the debating chamber is a debate. It's if we can steer away from debate, and we can just focus. Let's focus on the papers. Let's focus on the agenda. Let's focus on the recommendations of the report. Never you mind, elected member that's put yourself up in front of your community for election. Never you mind want to debate and stand up for their...
Listen, let the good people home make their decision on this, Jerry.
Indeed.
I am now going to jump over to our amazing technical board here and play snippets from that committee. Oh my goodness, hold your breath.
I'm going to get a...
Item on the agenda today, and that is the safety of lithium-ion batteries, the campaign.
Convener, Councillor Damaso here. I raised my hand. I would like to request, Convener, that we drop standing orders today to have a discussion and vote on the agenda due to public interest and discontent on the newly adopted brown bin charges. You'll be aware that there was a petition submitted to the council with over 1,700 signatures, and there's a public outcry on the matter which demands a members' debate and vote. I would suggest today on the matter.
Thanks for that, Councillor Damaso. Yes, I've noted your comment, and I will just update you on the procedure that was passed in December at full council, and that's in and around the due process that is relevant to petitions. That process must be followed, and must be central to any forthcoming decision in and around that petition.
Convener, respectfully, Convener, I've requested that we drop standing orders. No, I'm not referring to standing orders. I'm requesting that we drop standing orders today to have that debate due to the public outcry and discontent on the policy and vote on the matter. So I'm not referring to.
So I am clearly setting the scene here, gentlemen. So this is a fantastic convener, Councillor Helen Loughran, trying to convince Councillor Damasio that the simple rule of asking for a suspension of standing orders to allow a member debate on a contentious subject matter, and that was then met with here's the rules and procedures which have changed in December in relation to petitions. The petition is not in question. That is not the point. The point is this is a simple functioning process for elected members to use anything to suspend standing orders to take forward a debate.
Now, that sounded to me as if we don't want to debate anything. Gets better. We want to find a way to ignore what you've just said, and we'll refer you. We'll drop a wee red herring, and we'll refer you to a decision that was made at a previous committee, which is a bit. No, it's just not relevant at all. But it's almost just to get you take your mind off something else, and we'll try and hopefully kid enough of these members in here that's the rules, and they'll just nod their head, and they'll not want to upset their party anyway, or their group leader and business manager.
From the person that's meant to read those rules, who understands those rules and really should have known better by saying it's just a simple process, not a problem, let's go to
vote.
Robbie,
if we are elected members and we bring something to a committee and it's urgent, we want to discuss it, why can that not be allowed? Surely that's one of the things that's totally wrong with the way we do business in that chamber.
I think it is, but I've got to be honest, right? Now, you spoke about some members being sharper and more prepared than others, and I think there's a real fear of having an honest and off-the-cuff debate, because off-the-cuff debate means that you need to be on top of your brief, right? You need to know what you're talking about, you need to have the confidence to say it, and you need to have the confidence to say it well.
Well, you're not going to embarrass yourself. You're getting an enhanced payment as a convener by allowing just a standard debate.
Absolutely not.
Gentlemen, I'm not trying to preempt any of the discussions. I do want to go through a couple other wee clips just so we can hear how crazy this becomes in just a simple member raising a simple procedural matter. So let's jump to the next clip.
That one, Councillor Damasio, the standing orders are relevant in and around the agenda that is here today. There is no agenda item relevant at present for the petition. The petition falls wide of today's obviously agenda, and the due process must be adhered to.
Convener, I'm not simply requesting a debate on a petition. I'm requesting that we go to a vote of the members of this committee, and not for the chair to make a decision, but for the members of this committee to vote on whether we should drop standing orders to discuss that policy.
Okay, we'll head straight into a vote then on that one.
Thank you.
Councillor Damasio.
So we heard there that there was a wee bit of gaslighting taking place, that we're talking about this policy decision, but then ultimately has to renege and say, okay, because she clearly knows the rules. She's the convener, she must know the rules, that if any member proposes a suspension of standing orders, straight to the vote. There should not be any, what, Robbie? Debate, conversation. There shouldn't be anything at all in relation to that, because we're not even at that point yet.
No. It's a yes or a no.
It's a yes or a no. However, our great convener decided that she was going to open it up to the floor, and there's an interesting point here. There is an interesting point that comes out, and that was in the debate. So we have a Conservative raising debate, and we have the Lord Provost raising debate. But let me play the Conservative, because I think this is a point that we can answer, Jerry. I think this is a point we can answer.
Today, sorry,
Yeah, convener, just before we move to the vote, I think it's worth stating in clear terms that Councillor Damasio and the PCNL group voted in support of introducing the brown bin charge in February 2024. So this is just the most shameless political game playing of the worst kind.
Yeah, exactly. This had Councillor Damasio and other members had their successful budget request gone ahead, we would already be in the place where that would have been. No, you may not, Councillor Damasio, but I'm taking on board the comment from the committee member today, and he's just making it aware to all committee members that suddenly now you have found an area of contention with the bins. Yeah, at the budget in 23, you wholeheartedly and resoundingly made it clear that your intention was to take it as a budget decision, and I think that must be embraced by the committee today. So, as you have inferred, we will move this forward to allow you to, we will have the vote on the suspension of standing orders, and you, as you have said, Councillor McManus is your seconder today. I, as committee chair, move that we continue with agenda business today and allow the petition in due course to take its necessary pathway.
So there we have Cllr, which in my opinion, because I don't know any other descriptive word for this, is that I could only call this gaslighting. So they're coming up with excuses to try and get a member to no follow through on a simple procedural request. But I'm going to come back to the real point of contention in this for me is Councillor Nathan Wilson. When Nathan turned around and said it is terrible that this political game playing is being made when PCNL had that as a budget decision in 2023, or according to the convener, which the convener's words, when his contribution at finish was exactly that was political point scoring.
What a shambles!
What a shambles indeed.
Do you know what was funny in that? And it's not funny, haha. It's just it's funny to listen. There appeared to me to be more respect shown to Nathan than there was to the original proposer.
That was a
and more certainly more respect shown towards him. But one of the and then backed up by the convener. Then backed up by the convener. Yeah. And doubled down while Paul's sitting there patiently waiting on yes or no, waiting on the vote. But one of the things that and this is a bit of gaslighting as well. Nathan was allowed by the convener to make a political point to try and rubbish Paul's credentials, right, by saying that and it was actually in 2024.
Well, that's what I was going to say. They keep confusing themselves.
In our budget motion, yes, we did include the brown bin charges. It was a relatively small amount. It was a recurring saving of something like £210,000.
Yep.
And on that basis, given that we were talking about £100 million or so in savings that needed to be made, we thought that was a big black that's fine.
Robbie, if you remember.
Aye. That was before we got a record increase in our budget from Scottish Government, and that was certainly before we increased council tax by 10%. Right, so that the 10% increase in council tax generated about £17 million. There you go, every year. So that's an extra 17. But wait a minute. What these individuals fail to take into account is circumstances changed, right? So we didn't have money in 2024. We have money now. So when the circumstances change, it is a politician's responsibility to change their mind. There's no point
100%.
That as James I use James O'Brien quite a lot when we're speaking, but why have a mind if you're never prepared to change it? And if the circumstances change, you must have the ability to at least reassess the position to see if a change of mind is required.
An interesting question for you, Robbie, right? And the question is you would be representing your electorate because you're an independent.
Of course.
And have you decided that, do you know what, let's say hypothetically there's a charge in something and you later find out, do you know something, the council's actually received significant money in this certain department, well, it's actually alright, I'm going to actually change my position in this. I'm going to actually say, do you know what, I've been speaking to my electorate, I've actually had conversations with quite a few people, and they're asking me to support the idea of the status quo rather than cutting something or charging for something. Would you see that as being reasonable?
Of course. Your constituents have just lost their fuel allowance. They've just, circumstances changed.
10% council tax increase, and you've had all these other lovely additional costs.
Why would you not oppose that?
Why would you not oppose that? Now, here's the point for me in this is, again, poll at that committee was led by 1,700 signatories. This isn't Paul saying I spoke to somebody up my granny's, but they've said to me they're unhappy about a brown buncher. There is over 1,700 people at that time, before it got to 2,500. But at that time there was 1,700 people that signed a petition. So this becomes a democratic will of the people for their elected member to raise that within a chamber. I'm not going to spend all night trying to play these clips. I'm going to play one last one, and this one comes for the Lord Provost, and then we'll have a proper discussion about everything.
I'm fully anticipating that the Provost comes on and says, convener, can we move directly, without delay, can we move directly to the vote on Councillor Damasio's request for standing orders to be suspended?
I wish I was as optimistic as you. I wish I was.
Hope springs eternal.
Listen, it really does. Eternal. But here we go, Jerry. Hold your nose. We're about to take a deep dive again into this nonsense.
The item was the submission of a petition in and around dissent and obviously
Point of order,
difficulties.
Kavira, just for clarity, because clearly there isn't any coming from the hybrid members from the committee. There's been a move from Councillor Damasio for us to consider a petition, and I think it is important for members of the community who are listening in, and I'm sure members, when this is clipped, to understand they wish for this committee to consider a petition, not to consider a reversal of the policy, but to consider a petition, because of course PCNL and other members of the council will be aware, if they wishes to reverse it, they have to identify the saving. Perhaps they wish to cut budgets of social work, perhaps they want to get into schools, I don't know, but they wishes to consider the petition, not a reversal of the policy. It is politicking at the worst. There's been disrespect shown to you as chair, which is continually demonstrated for members of a political group in this chamber. I would ask them to reflect on that, and I would ask us to have the vote, and perhaps PCNL will see, like they do in other committees and in full council, they hold no sway, no influence over any group, independent or otherwise, in this council.
So can I just clarify, Chair?
So Councillor Damasio, we're moving straight to the vote on this one. Well,
you're voting on. Can I clarify?
What we intend to do,
please? Can I clarify what the vote is for? Since the Provost has outlined it to you differently.
24th of December.
Point of order, convener. I move standing order 15, the removal of Councillor Damasio for this committee.
I second that.
I second that too.
Right.
So there is a lot to unpack in that. Not only is that the Lord Provost of the council highlighting and supporting a simple procedure being overlooked. Again, I'm not even going to ask the question about how he conducts full council meetings then, Jerry, if that's the case, he has understanding of the rules. I have to put out right now that I wrote to both the Lord Provost and Councillor Helen Loughran to come on tonight. Maybe it's us, maybe we've took this completely wrong, we don't understand the rules, going to come on and actually highlight the areas that we may be sort of misrepresenting in this. Yes. And unfortunately neither have returned the emails, Jerry, and the invitations that went unanswered. However, to make sure that there is balance and a right to reply, we will continue to send these emails out and hopefully they'll come on. But let's deep dive into that clip.
I think that the treatment of Councillor Damasio by members of the administration in attendance and speakers at that meeting was absolutely reprehensible.
Is it bullying?
Now, bullying is
Is it bullying? That's the question. I perceived it as bullying.
I think not only were individuals without a horse in the race, they don't want to speak about the petition, right?
Yep.
Paul wanted to speak about the petition.
Yep.
Never got the opportunity to speak about the petition. Never got an opportunity actually to go to the vote.
Yeah.
Even to suspend standing orders. While members of the Conservative group and the Lord Provost were allowed, and indeed the convener herself, were able to speak about Paul, about decisions of his group, without giving any respect to him whatsoever. And I thought that was shameful.
I think the group, officers, everybody involved in that should be taking a right good hard look at themselves. I think it was an absolute shambles, to be honest with you. It was shambolic. We're putting that out to people, and people are turning in to watch that, and
taxpayers' money's paying their salaries. That's the bit about this. Councillors have just took an increase of 6% to their salaries. So a convener, Lord Provost, everybody's on £30,000 a year.
There's about 10 minutes of debate there that should have been. It shouldn't even go to any debate. There should be no. As soon as you ask for the standing orders, we'll have a vote in the standing orders.
Yes or no. Yes or no.
And then that's it done.
Yeah.
Yes or no.
Do you know, see when
it doesn't get discussed.
Rob, see the point where the Provost intercedes. I genuinely believed that he was going to offer advice, because he's the civic leader of the council, right? He chairs and convenes
all full councils,
really contentious full councils where we're going at it hammer and tongue. He knows his stuff, and it was absolutely incumbent on him to, if he needed to give soft advice to his party colleague and fellow convener, to stick to standing orders.
Well, here's the bit. To jump straight to a standing order 50, which means eject the member, because people listening at home listen to that there. And I'll reiterate again, this video is available on Watch the Point Facebook page, it's on YouTube, it's on the Watch the Point channel, it's on various platforms that Watch the Point has. And again, I would advise people to go in and watch it, because you should see for yourself. When Councillor Damasio was ejected for the meeting, there was a smirk by the convener with regards to being ejected for the meeting. When Councillor Kenny Duffy had highlighted the Section 50, you would have thought that the Labour WhatsApp group would have kept everybody abreast and just said let it go to a vote, because ultimately you're making more of a deal out of something by ejecting a member than anything else.
See the point that Rob made earlier on in the show when you first came on about not having these kind of discussions in the chamber, and that because it's so futile bringing an argument to the floor, that you just bypass it entirely and you go to officers rather than have it. I think this is probably a good example of exactly why you do that.
It's scandalous to watch. It's absolutely terrible. Putting somebody out for something like that. The guys, he's right in what he's saying. Just have a vote and standing orders, and you've got all these other people getting involved.
But this isn't the first time, Robbie. This is now the third time.
It's my belief. I would go as far as to say it's my belief, right? And no one will be able to dissuade me from having this approach. It is my belief that if a member of Progressive Change North Lanarkshire forces a debate or challenges the standing orders of the council in a way that doesn't run contrary to them, if the convener doesn't like that, and if the convener seems to be under pressure or being challenged, then colleagues within the administration will jump to her defence or his defence
and eject the member
and seek ejection of that member.
Well, here's what it becomes a democratic deficit. That's what it becomes.
Without question.
And again, in my belief and opinion, this is nothing more than political bullying, because ultimately Progressive Change have two members within that committee, Labour with the support of the Conservatives and the support potentially the Independent and Councillor John Joe Leckie. It's 14, that's the number, 14, whereas other people who may be liberal minded or just no involved in the discussion that much equates to 10. So it's a numerical advantage. They knew they had that advantage, so you could have let that go to a yes or no vote. They would have won the vote and they'd have saved themselves all this absolute madness that ensued under Councillor Helen Loughran's stewardship.
We have to give a shout out, well, not a shout out, but absolutely recognise that the leader of the SNP
yes,
group,
definitely, there definitely is that.
She made a very, very good point about the process and about adhering to standing orders.
Well, it's when Councillor Loughran proposed an amendment to Paul's proposal to suspend standing order. You do not propose an amendment. It's a simple yes or no vote.
It's a yes or no.
And I was glad that she did say, has anybody actually read the rules? Because that would be the first time. Listen, I'm not going to dwell too much more on this. A couple of other points before Robbie leaves that I want to kind of touch upon, but just before I do, I'll read Paul's statement. It was my intention to get Paul on the night, Robbie, just to take a phone call to ask a couple of questions about how he felt with regards to his treatment, because ultimately it's nothing but disrespect to that member.
He was actually not only was he kicked out, he was told he was free to leave.
Yeah.
He was free to leave before then.
He was given it. I couldn't believe. I was cringing with embarrassment on that point. Right, from Paul Damasio, what unfolded at the recent committee meeting was nothing short of shambolic. I raised a perfectly legitimate point of order to suspend standing orders, a simple, well-established procedure to allow members to debate and, if necessary, vote on a matter of major public concern. I was representing over 1,700 petitioners opposed to the new bin charge policy, and the number then soared to more than 2,500 within days after footage of the meeting was published. The public saw exactly what happened. Rather than allow due process, Chair Councillor Loughran redirected the discussion to petition procedure, which had nothing to do with my request. Then the convener opened the floor, not to clarification or debate, but to a Tory councillor, Nathan Wilson, and later the Lord Provost, who called for me to be ejected for the meeting. In a twist that sums up the farce, once I was removed, the committee realised they still needed someone to propose the vote on the very motion I had raised. So yes, they had to bring me back in. Then once that was done, they figured out they needed a separate vote to remove me in the first place. You couldn't make it up. This was not just an abusive process, it was an insult to every resident I was there to represent. Unfortunately for Labour, the public saw it all. The surge in petition numbers is a clear message. The people will not be silenced when debate is shut down, when councillors are removed for representing their communities, and when procedure is twisted to avoid scrutiny. It's not just democracy that suffers, it's those in power who should take note. And I think that's a very fair comment for Councillor Damasio.
Very measured.
And as I said again, the others were offered the opportunity and the right to reply, but unfortunately they haven't took up any invitation to come on the show. We will remain hopeful that somebody for the Labour administration comes on. But I do think there is another point in that before I do quickly move on, and it's to come on to the point that Kenny Duffy made, Jerry, in regards to the lack of influence that PCN or even yourselves, Robbie, and others would have in that chamber, because that numerical advantage, because Labour pay positions of the opposition leader who gets an enhanced payment, then you have the Conservatives who are on enhanced payments. How can you ever have proper discourse in a chamber? How can that ever be achieved when everybody is receiving enhanced payments?
You can't.
That's good enough for me. I'm happy to move on. Perfect. Thank you very much.
I'm glad you said that in unison.
Yeah, I'm glad of that. Okay, so we're going to go straight to political highlight, Robbie. I don't know if you know this about us, and even with my Daily Daft podcast, we always like our political highlights. So I'm going to come to Jerry, then I'm going to come to you, and I'll finish off, alright? Jerry, political highlight of the week, and I think I know where you're already going with this.
I've got a couple, right? Because I only gave you one last time and you cheated.
No, the rules
and
have
you
changed.
didn't even stick to the weekly arrangement, so you're getting two. I think it's the first one was going back to the elections down in England last Thursday, and the newly elected Lincolnshire regional mayor for Reform, Dame Andrea Jenkins. One of the first things that she said that she was going to do was she was going to remove all diversity officers from the county council, to rapturous applause from the Reform masses.
Wow.
Spoiler. Only to find out that Lincolnshire County Council don't employ any. So that's
your Donald Trump moment with it. What do you call them? The seagulls, the Penguins.
Oh,
the
yeah,
Penguins
yeah,
putting
yeah,
the tariffs
yeah,
on
yeah.
on the
hilarious.
island that didn't exist.
Oh,
but
goodness.
the masses still applaud. So I thought that was. I was looking up the word hyperbole actually whenever I was thinking about reform, and that's exactly.
Yeah.
I know it's not a clear-cut example, but it's good enough for me. The second highlight for me is really the question: is a two-party system over now? Given the results, and see when you look at the vote share down there, and you look at the seat share that came, and I know it was only a snapshot. It's not a full election, but Reform took 31% of the vote share. Wow. Labour took something like 34% of the vote share in the general election.
Yeah.
So you are not far away. They took 41% of the seats. But the terrifying thing, if you are minded to be a Labour candidate, is that they only took 14% of the vote share in those local elections. And in terms of the seat share, only 6%. That is terminal decline for a party who have only been in power for a relatively short period of time, but who on the back of serious mistakes just continue to go down that road.
Robbie, political highlight?
Oh, I've not really got any political highlights this week.
Have you no? All right.
Can I jump in then with another one?
I'm non-political. But seeing the result coming in for Staffordshire with the 46 Conservatives losing and then 46 Reform.
I'm looking forward to when the Conservatives start handing in
absolutely astronomical for that to happen. You know, everybody switching.
Reform. It's the only party they ever wanted to join.
It's what came out of that though was Brexit is still a big feature, and people are still voting along those lines. So like in the wards where more than 65% voted Leave in 2016, Reform won about 45% of the vote share in those seats, and where Remain was predominant in those areas, they only get 20%.
I wonder if the Conservative leader in North Lanarkshire, Sandy Watson's in great fear this evening and over the next couple of months, especially.
Or he's on the blower.
The old, it might be on the blower. He could potentially be on the blower, but these bright young things within his party, maybe eyeing up a potential MP
ticket for Reform,
MSP seat. There could be something there. Jerry, my political highlight of the week will come as no surprise, and I am going to talk about the Environment and Climate Change Committee again. And I have never laughed so much in all my life when Councillor Damasio was given the option to leave the chamber or be booted out the chamber, and then 10 to 15 minutes later the penny dropped that they needed him back in to try and get him to vote. But here's the bit that had me in stitches. They made it a binary choice, so after the vote on the standing orders, then he was to vote on whether or not he's to be ejected in the chair.
It was.
You could not make it up.
Amateur.
Oh my goodness.
No, the amateurs had moved out.
Oh, they were gone.
Seen enough.
They were gone. I have never seen so much hilarity. If I was in that meeting, I'd have just been sitting there howling at the relation to it. But anyway, next point that I would make is for anybody at all that wishes to see the video, shameless plug again, go into the What's the Point social media channels. You'll find us on Spotify, you'll find us on YouTube, Facebook, TikTok and Instagram, and give it a wee like and a follow. But the video is live there for you to be able to watch that. If anybody wishes still to sign the petition, again on social media and on these pages, you'll be able to still sign the petition of 2,500 signatories the last time I checked.
Is there going to be a closing date for that particular petition?
For the petition, well, there could potentially be, but it's all dependent because we're waiting on a response, or we're not, in relation to who owns the brown bins. I don't know about you guys, but I've had a number of emails.
I've had discussions on that.
Right, oh well, Robbie, you can come in a second. But basically what I find interesting is a lot of people have said to me, if I don't want a brown bin, Greg, where can I leave it? How do I get rid of this? And Robbie, you're going to fill me in?
Yes, I've had exactly the same.
Right.
From many constituents. I think they're going to find a few hundred bins maybe sitting in
the street.
In the street. So that'll be another added cost to come and pick them up. You know, I did ask the question about who owned the brown bins, Apparently, when we gave them out, it was the council that owned them.
Right.
But now we had a decision at a committee meeting in the recent year, last year. We now gave them to so we paid all that money for them. We've now gave them to the tenants and the owners. So we've paid all that money for the bins. We've gave them away. Some of the people are going to put them on the street. We're going to have to pick them up at another cost. It's just honestly.
What if it was a case that North Lanarkshire showed complete civil disobedience, and actually everybody who did not want that brown bin put it out in the street, or better still, took it to the civic centre? Do you think that would? I think that would be a brilliant press story.
That would be a good story.
I think that would be a fantastic press story.
Not speaking specifically about brown bins, but I think there has always got to be a place for direct action.
Of course there is.
It's, of course there is. And in a healthy,
people actually, you're shouting down
people
functioning debate.
People appreciate getting a chance to show their objection to a policy.
Of course.
I don't know what you guys think, but I think they just pick these policies up. Have you ever heard that where they'll say, all the other councils in Scotland are doing it?
Yeah. Every committee meeting.
It's everything. every committee meeting. I know, my goodness.
It's as if we're that void of ideas now that we just look to South Lanarkshire or somewhere else and go, what are they doing that we could maybe...
That's our famous
bring in.
Famous El Presidente. I can't get the sound bite done quick enough.
There is a kind of... I think there's a theme going on. There's been a few things, like the walking to school criteria that we used was kind of 2014. The additional support needs transport policy was 2006 since it was reviewed. So that's the kind of mindset that we've got.
So finally, just before we kind of finish up, because I'm sure the good people at home have had enough of your hilarity for an evening, Robbie, a question's came in for yourself. And this is from Louise from Shotts. As an independent councillor, does Councillor McKendrick vote in accordance with his own thoughts, or does he vote in accordance with what his community wants? For example, what happens when there is a clash between what an independent councillor thinks and what the community wants?
It would always be based on the community first.
Robbie, I didn't think there would be any other answer for you. I have another one in here. Where are we? Kev from Motherwell, loved the episode, Robert, really eye-opening. Can you explain what the point of these council committees is if they're just rubber stamping pre-made decisions? Is there any independent mechanism left in the council that can actually stop or amend these decisions? I think you've kind of answered that.
There's not really anything that can be done at the moment unless the numbers change.
Right, you're a bit...
Independents, if they wanted to group together, that would be the only way to change it.
Somebody's jumped ahead of me here and sent me in a quick question as well. Hi Greg, you mentioned the residents that own we own brown bins, so why are the residents being told we're being charged for our own bin collections? What would happen if we don't want these and put them in the street for collection? Better still, we drop them all at the civic centre. I think we've kind of just covered that there.
Yeah, I think so.
And I think that if people wish to take their bins to the civic centre, power to your elbow. And if you want to put them out in the street for collection, I think that if the majority of people feel that way inclined, then the council must be sent a clear message on that fact. And last question before we finish up, because that is past. Hi team, saw the opinion poll that Labour's control tactics, brilliant idea, but generally if the public turns against them, does the council have to listen, or are these just gestures? And if the public opinion doesn't work, what next? So I think what that question's in relation to is Labour are in total control in administration. If people are boycotting or asking questions and asking their councillors to raise significant points of interest, is Labour so removed for reality? Are they going to take any notice anymore, or are they just so complicit?
I would say in these circumstances you need to get back to old politics. You need to try and win your arguments on the street and in the community halls, and you need to put pressure on.
Well, it was an interesting point, Rob, because Jerry and I wanted to kind of... There's no opinion poll in relation to how Labour's performing and whether or no people actually voted in Labour and they wanted the Conservatives to be in coalition. We don't actually know where Labour sits in locally within North Lanarkshire, and I think that even with the SNP and the Conservatives as well, and the rise potentially of reform, not cheerleader, but I'm just saying it's there in the public ether, that we have to start recognising that could be a potential. We wanted to launch a wee opinion poll with regards to whether or not people truly believe and feel satisfied that their local Labour elected members are providing the right representation. And on that note, we'll be dropping that probably tonight or tomorrow, that it's not a consultation, it's an opinion poll. We want to know what your views are on Labour, and then we'll be launching one for the SNP, the Conservatives and ourselves and others over the coming weeks as well. So it would be good to find out what people's views and opinions are. And really, in effect, I think that's us. So all it's left to say is thank you very much for joining us. I hope you've got something out of this. I don't know what, but hopefully we've tried to explain things in a wee bit of a better light.
No, I think we've an obligation to be to inform the good people of our towns and villages how local politics actually works
or doesn't work.
And really what to expect from your councillors.
I know it's final for us to say is, Robbie, thank you so much for joining us and giving us honest and reflective conversation.
Thanks for having me.
Enjoyed it.
Greatly appreciated.